Green Lantern Corps number 12, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Fernando Pasarin. Last issue we left off with the entire Corps fighting against the Alpha Lanterns, and then they introduced this giant kaiju-sized Manhunter thing, and then this issue continues from there, but it's basically just fight scene the issue. Like, it's just a whole thing. So Varix, one of the Alpha Lanterns, is holding Guy and John captive, and he was the one who had like a crisis of conscience of like, are we the baddies? Are we actually the bad guys here? But he's basically telling like, hey, shut down your giant kaiju, and he's like, no. And then just so much fighting. And I do have to be critical here is that I have no sense of scale for this. Like, it's cutting all over the battlefield, all these different people. I genuinely cannot follow A to B to C to D here. So at some point, all the Alpha Lanterns are like, okay, we got to go deal with the kaiju thing. So all Alpha Lanterns come here, and they just, like, fly inside of it and blow it up from the inside. And that takes care of that. And they're like, all right, everybody else, you're all getting depowered. And they depower everybody's lantern rings, including Guy and John's, and they all hit 0. And it's like, all of you are unfit to be Green Lanterns. We are charging all of you a treason. But before that, John Stewart, Guy Gardner, you're sentenced for execution. Let's go. And as Varix holds them, like handcuffs them, he feeds them just a tiny bit of green energy juice, enough to get, their willpower back up. And at that point, they then spring a surprise attack on the Alpha Lanterns, and the Alpha Lanterns are like, oh, what is this? How'd they get free? And then Varix turns on them as well, and literally just like explodes all their rings and such. And also, it seems to be just their bodies. Like, they're dead. They're straight up gone. And so they're all laying crumpled on the floor. Varix is looking at them, and Guy's like, hey, thanks for saving our ass. And he's just like, no, you guys aren't. Like, these were my teammates. Like, they were good people. They got corrupted by power, though. And I guess that means, like, I got corrupted by power as well. And they're like, no, Varix, you had your conscience. Like, you were the one who did the right thing in the end. Clearly, you were not that corrupted. And he's like, yeah, but I could have done something earlier. So an Alpha Lantern has to seek justice, no matter what that justice is. And Varix turns his Alpha ring on himself and blows his own head off. Like, pretty gruesomely. It's just like blood and a stub there. And so his ring flies off and goes away. At that point, Guy and John, since they're the only one with any willpower yet, and they're stuck in the science cells, they get all the lanterns together and they all fly out of the science cells. And as they're flying out, there's a voice that sounds like it's coming from a ring saying, let me out. And they all lose power for a second, but then they get it back, and this is like, ring, what was that? And it's just like, oh, no clue. And it's like, huh, all right, well, we'll have to deal with that later. But they all fly out, and then we see at the Crypt of the Green Lanterns, they're giving a service for not only Varix, but all the Alpha Lanterns, because they did their job. They did what they were supposed to do. Despite the fact that they may have taken it too far, they did what they believed was best for the Green Lantern Corps. So they're all honored with statues. And Guy makes the comment of like, the list of people who die from being a Green Lantern gets longer every day, huh? And John's like, yep. So then we get to the Guardians, and the Guardians are like, huh, well, that worked out pretty much as well as it possibly could have. Our evil machinations would have been put in danger if the Alpha Lanterns were still around, but now they're not. And we're going to go ahead and destroy their Alpha rings as well. So they will never be able to fight against our third army. So then we see the scraps of the kaiju being brought back down into the foundry under Oa. And it's just like, well, this is yet another one of the Guardians' failures. Just wonder which one's going to be next. And then we see the Guardians watching them being like, yes, who indeed? And that's where we leave off. I liked it. I think it was a solid thing. Here's the thing, though. They only really hit this point of just total corruption at the very end here, but it's more of a going by the book sort of issue. It's like anyone who betrays the Green Lanterns must be executed. That's in their rules, and that's a good enough rule on its own. But then it's like, okay, the Green Lanterns, what does that mean? Well, that means the code of the Green Lanterns. And if you turn against the Alpha Lanterns, you're turning against the rule of the Green Lanterns, because there's the rules personified. And it was kind of like one of the like Isaac Asimov stories of like the laws of robotics, where it's like, if these rules aren't tuned perfectly, there's some sort of unforeseen circumstance. In this case, it makes it so that the Alpha Lanterns see anybody who speaks against them as a traitor to the core. And it's good. It was a good story in that regard. I do think, though, that if they wanted to play up like the power corrupts sort of angle, they could have spent a bit more time on that, because it didn't really seem like we got that so much as we just got like, man, you guys are kind of like, it's just the internal affairs. It's just literally all the cops turning against internal affairs at this point. It wasn't that they were corrupt. It was that like they were following the rules too closely and didn't have any wiggle room for special circumstances. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But I did enjoy it. I really did like the arc as a whole. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I really did enjoy it. It also says tune in at the end of this month for the Green Lantern Annual, where we'll find out what that crazy-ass voice from that ring was. So be sure to tune into that if you haven't been watching Green Lantern. Beyond that, I'm excited for seeing. I think this all ties into Third Army stuff once we get back from the Zero issue, so we'll see how that goes. In fact, no, actually, the Zero issue does not tie into the Third Army stuff, but as soon as we get back, we'll see what happens in the Guardians' final master plan or whatever.